"Oh, I am not eating carbohydrates." And I say, "What?" Hello, I am Gabriel and here we are with another episode of Best Nutrition Ever. So sometimes I will be talking to people and I will be asking them about their diets, and I often hear this saying that they just say to me, "Oh, I am not eating carbohydrates." And I say, "What?" So today I want to talk about this idea of avoiding carbohydrates in some diets. But first, what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are one of the three main macronutrients we need in our diets. So we have proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is basically the main source of energy that our body gets and that our body needs. From where can our body get carbohydrates? From the food. Okay? So we need carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the main source of energy. Carbohydrates provide us with energy. They are broken down into glucose, and it is actually our body's preferred energy source. So now I want to discuss this idea about avoiding carbohydrates. There are basically two types of carbohydrates. They are called simple and complex carbohydrates. They are usually called as well refined and non-refined carbohydrates. So what are simple or refined carbohydrates? Usually refined or simple carbohydrates are carbohydrates. It's basically carbohydrates that have been processed in the food industry, so they are not usually in their natural way. As an example of refined carbohydrates, we have, for example, white bread, French fries, cookies, sodas, donuts. So those are examples of refined carbohydrates or simple carbohydrates. Now, on the other hand, we also have complex carbohydrates or non-refined carbohydrates. So what are these carbohydrates? One example of these carbohydrates will be, for example, whole wheat bread, potatoes, oatmeal, brown pasta. So what is the main difference in between refined carbohydrates and non-refined carbohydrates or complex or simple carbohydrates? Basically, I will say it's the fiber, okay? And why? Because the fiber is something that is going to make us feel full, and it's going to send a message to our brain to say, okay, it's enough food. Stop. You don't have to eat. You don't have to eat that much. The thing is, when foods are deprived from fiber, they usually don't send that message of being full as early to the body, and so it's not that efficient. The process is not as efficient as it should be. So we end up eating more, make us gain weight, make us turn that carbohydrates into fat, because we're basically eating more than what we should be eating because our body doesn't need that much amount of calories or carbohydrates. So the other thing is this thing called glycemic index. So what the glycemic index does is basically a table with a register that contains an information that's going to say to us how high our blood glucose levels are going to be if we have this kind of food. So different types of carbohydrates on food have different types of glycemic indexes, okay? So as an example of this, for example, we have white bread. White bread has a glycemic index of about 100. It depends on tables, it changes, but it's usually 100 compared to, for example, brown rice, which is 68. So it's actually a lower glycemic index. What this glycemic index is telling to us, so we're going to have our blood glucose levels and we're going to have our time and hours. So um, with the um, high glycemic index foods, our blood glucose levels are going to reach higher in a shortened span of time. Okay, so they're going to reach higher sooner. So we're going to feel a spike or energy. We're going to feel a spike of energy, but then we're going to feel our energies we're gonna feel our energy going down, okay? And then we can feel like in a bad mood, or we can feel anger, or depression, or anxiety, basically because our blood glucose levels are going down really fast. So the idea I want to share today that is not about avoiding carbohydrates. Our body needs carbohydrates, our body needs energy, our body needs calories. But what we need is a good source of energy and a good type of carbohydrates. So what we need is to eat more complex carbohydrates, okay, non-refined carbohydrates, carbohydrates with fiber that our body needs. For example, whole wheat bread, brown pasta, brown rice, fruits, and so on, and to avoid or eat less of the refined carbohydrates such as, for example, sugar table, white bread, cookies, donuts, and sodas. So the main idea for today is that our body needs carbohydrates and carbohydrates are healthy for us. It all depends on the kind of carbohydrates that we're having. So if you like this video, if you found it useful, please remember to share, subscribe, like, and comment. Thank you.